JR, you're one of the most effective communicators I know. What's your secret?
Oh, thanks. I just think recognizing communication is a skill, and skills can be improved. So I just try and actively improve my communication skills.
I got that dish. Got that
Interesting.
I got that dish. 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 I got that dish. I got that dish. That dish.
Hey, y'all. It's Onika.
And JR.
And you are dishing with Dainty Dish. How you doing today, JR?
I'm doing lovely. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well.
What was with that question?
Hold on. I wanted to tell you about my weekend.
Nobody cares.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. What's going on?
Happy birthday once again to my mom. She turned 65 last week. I went down to the Durham region and I spent some time with her. It was awesome, spending some time with the family. And then I worked this weekend, and that was it. That's all I wanted to say. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay.
You were asking me what's up with the question at the top of the show.
What was going on with that?
Well, I kind of been doing a lot of reflecting, as I've been writing and doing a lot of reading, more reading than I normally had been before, and listening to more podcasts. Like, I realize the people that I'm engaging with are really effective communicators. And I don't think I'm the most effective communicator, but I know my ability to communicate has gotten me out of one or two jams when it comes to my mental health. And so I thought we'd talk about effective communicating today and how sometimes when you're experiencing a mental health crisis, it's something you definitely need to learn to have.
Okay, cool.
All right. So a big part of communication is critical thinking.
Okay.
Now, for me, I would say I developed my critical thinking skills at a fairly young age. Out of necessity, I was always a very analytical little girl, always asking questions, always asking why to get to the root cause of the situation and get the answers. And I feel like that is one of the most necessary things, being able to ask those questions and analyze situations to come up with a conclusion or a judgment for your analysis. Like, that is a huge part of what critical thinking is.
I don't know. I guess mine comes from my dad just saying, think. Think. After every action, he's like, think. Like, why'd you do that? Think. And it just kind of grew from there. So I don't know.
That's interesting you say that. I would be reminded of my mom. Anytime I asked her a word that I didn't understand, she'd say, go look it up in the dictionary.
Yeah, I've been through that.
You've been through that one?
Mm-hmm.
It's just an interesting way of, that's how she communicated to me that I need to just learn this lesson on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Another key part of communication is knowing what being an effective communicator is. So, for instance, being engaged in a conversation.
See, that was an example of me not being engaged in the conversation. You left a little opening there for me to jump in, I guess. Is that what you were trying to?
Yeah.
You were trying to prove there? Oh, okay. I don't know. I think it all comes down to, in communication, I think it comes down to hearing and listening.
Ooh.
Yeah. So you could be listening to somebody, but you're not hearing them. And you asked me how I developed my communication skills. It was because I worked as a server and a bartender for through school and stuff. So you spend so much time having to take someone's order. You have to listen to what they're saying. You have to write it down. You have to repeat it back to them. So, and even though it's like a mundane task, you kind of learn to hear what people are saying. And then you pick up on the little things like substitutions. Is this an allergy? Is it just some sort of preference? And you have to write things down. You have to be quick. You have to, and the whole process is based off of that initial communication. So when the customer, the guest says, "I want a glass of water with ice and lemon with a salad," you have to effectively hear what they said, be listening, but you have to hear what they said, write it down, and then, communicate it back to them. So what I have for you is a water with lemon and a salad, and you do that for a couple of years, and you learn to be able to, you hear things, you pay attention.
I struggle with this.
Do you?
I do. I think from what I remember, I learned the difference between hearing and listening in my first year university psych class. I can't remember the teacher's name, but he was an awesome guy. And he just explained to us the difference between hearing and listening. So I proceeded to take that information and go home to my mother and start saying to her when she was saying something I didn't want to hear or listen to, that I'm hearing you, but I'm not listening to you. Super disrespectful. I'm so sorry, Mom, for all the times I said that to you. But I finally, I learned my lesson about what hearing was and what listening was. Mm-hmm. Hearing is background noise. It's the TV that's on behind you, or the streetcar that's, outside your window, or the screaming that happens at 3 a.m. by your apartment building, whatever. But listening, you have to actively listen. You have to be, it's an intention. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it has to be purposeful, and it has to have intention when you're listening.
And you say you struggle with this, even though you know what it means to do the difference between hearing and listening, but you struggle with this.
I struggle with it because I think sometimes I can be a defensive listener. So maybe it's the inability to sometimes read people's verbal or nonverbal cues. Not necessarily the verbal, but the nonverbal. I tend to get my back up in conversations, and we've been in conversations like this many a time, JR. I know we have, where you'll say something to me and I'll take a personal offense to it without having the entire picture or the entire portion of information that I need to analyze the situation. It's like I jump the gun sometimes. Do you know what I'm saying? So I still struggle with it. Like I find that overall I know how to actively listen, and I try to actively listen, but I still struggle with hearing versus listening.
I would agree with everything you said there, because you definitely you hear sometimes, you don't listen. It's fun to have a conversation with you where I'll say something and you'll just go off on a tangent, and then ultimately you'll repeat the exact same thing that I said. I'm just like,
I've done it on the show.
Like you're not listening. Like, what's going on with you? So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like you know you're doing it, but you don't care. I mean, that's what it has to come down to.
No. It's not that I don't care. Maybe it's that I don't care with you. I don't know. But I would hope to the outside world it wouldn't come across as that I don't care. I think it's just something I simply struggle with.
You're selfish?
Could be that I'm selfish. Could be that I'm narcissistic. We had an episode on that the last couple months. If you guys want to listen in on that one, the narcissism episode.
We just described your personality, I guess.
Yeah, basically. And we're describing me right now. So who knows? Who knows what it could be? I just kind of feel like it's something I'm constantly working on. I'm in the field of communication in my job and with this podcast, and I hope that the messages that I send out are received, and I hope that the messages that come in I listen to. So
listening to guests, how hard is that for you?
It can be challenging because all of our guests have had such amazing and interesting stories. And I find I'll take, like I said when I was talking about you, I'll take one part of a story and I'll think, I have a question. I'll have a question about that. And I don't jot things down. I kind of try to remember the question in my head. But in the midst of trying to remember that one specific question, I've lost some pertinent information in the conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
That happens to me all the time. I'm so sorry to my guests. And sometimes I'll even forget the question, to be honest with you. Like, it all gets jumbled up in my brain and I'll forget the question. But in the last couple of All Kinds of Crazy, I've tried to just actively listen, and I've tried to go with the flow of the conversation. I know you always talk about flow. And I've tried to go with the flow of the conversation and really just actively listen to what my guests are saying, because I'm genuinely interested. But I wanted to talk also about nonverbal and verbal communication and the importance of both. Which do you think is more important, nonverbal or verbal communication, JR?
What's more important?
Which do you think ranks higher?
I can't answer that question.
You can't answer that question?
Because they both they rank equally. Or at times, one may rank higher than the other. It all depends. Yeah. I mean, our language, our verbal communication evolved and is derived from our nonverbal communication. Like, language was not one of the first things that was in common amongst even different human populations, right? Like, we spoke different languages, but we could still figure things out that this is a friend versus this is a foe based on, nonverbal cues. So, I don't know. Can't rank them.
I think that was the best answer.
Oh. Ding, ding, ding. Woo. 10 points for me.
Verbal communication, that doesn't challenge me, really. I'm okay with verbal communication. Non-verbal communication, don't know if I could always read the cues.
You just said you have a problem listening, so you do have a challenge with verbal communication. Maybe that's your problem.
What?
You don't understand what where listening comes into play in the communication spectrum.
Is that the problem?
That might be the problem. You're like, I'm a great verbal communicator.
No, you know what I am? I'm not a great verbal communicator. Let's change that. I was born to talk. Now the problem is sometimes I'm not born to listen. That's the crux of it.
That's complete bull.
I could speak the word. The spoken language is not difficult for me, but it's the listening part we spoke about earlier.
Just because you're saying something and it might make sense doesn't mean it has value.
The point is, I'm a talker. Anyone who meets me knows I'm a talker.
Okay,
but sometimes my challenge lies in the listening part.
Okay,
and that's what I'm saying.
And I was adding to that by saying that just because you can talk and what you're saying makes sense doesn't mean it's providing value.
Well, I would hope what I say makes sense and provides value.
One would hope that too, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily the truth.
But one will hope. And go ahead.
So anyway, I was just saying that we have to be able to accept and say that we are not the best at something, and there's always room for improvement. There's always
room for improvement. There's always room for improvement for me, for you, for everybody listening. There's always room for improvement. So if I said I was the best, and I will hear it when I listen back to this episode.
No, I didn't say you were the best. I just said you were a talker.
Yeah, and I still think I'm a talker. Some of the stuff that comes out of my mouth is complete BS. I'm willing to admit that.
That is where I was extending what you said. Based on you said I'm a talker. I said, okay, just because the words make sense doesn't mean they provide value. And you just confirmed that by saying some of the stuff is BS.
Okay, I have a BA in BS, so it's entirely possible.
Communication. Let me tell you,
I struggle with it on a daily basis, but I'm doing the best that I can, guys. Just know I'm doing the best for you that I can. Okay. Talking to and talking at. Do I do this?
I'm not sure exactly what talking to and talking at actually means.
So talking to is us having a conversation, an exchange of words. Talking at is more something you would do maybe in the heat of anger, or if you're completely uninterested in what the other person has to say, or if you're mansplaining. Mansplaining is a really good example of talking.
What is mansplaining?
When you explain to a woman something she already knows. And a common thing.
That definition that doesn't even make sense. Say it again.
Like a common thing. Like if you were to explain to her how to use the water fountain in your office. She's new. Let's say she's new, and you're like, oh, and this is how you use the water fountain. You just push this button right here, lower it down, put the cup underneath, fill it with water. Okay, lift the lever up, and there you go. You have a cup of water.
So providing someone with... Oh, so if you decide to help someone and they happen to be... You're a man and it happens to be a woman, and she deems that it is something that she should already knows, or she already knows, that's mansplaining, is what you're telling me?
Something more, not that she deems she should already know, something that's just already known. Like, you don't need to explain it. Like saying something like, stop at the red light.
Which is something that you might say to anybody.
Or stop at the red light, because if you don't, we can crash the car.
Which is something you would say to anybody.
But when a man sometimes says it to a woman, it is called mansplaining.
Oh.
I'm sure there's a definition in the Urban Dictionary for it.
I just, no, because based on that example, I've been in a car with a buddy who was a male who was driving, and I was like, do you not see it's a red light? You need to stop. You're going to go through it. You're going to kill us. Mm-hmm. So if I had done that to a woman, that would have been me mansplaining. Essentially. That's what you're saying.
Essentially.
Okay, so what you're mansplaining isn't a real thing. Okay. Anyway, moving forward, I'm just trying to get an understanding. I'm just like,
God.
It's not a real
Please,
thing.
I'm begging you, look it up, because I could be wrong.
It's not a real...
Look it up. It's a thing.
But it has nothing to do with mental health, so we don't need to worry about it. So let's keep going.
No, but talking to and talking at... You, as I said, you talk at usually in the heat of like the moment, or you're in the heat of passion. So what kind of example can I give of talking at? It basically happens when you don't listen to the other party, you don't give them a word in edgewise, and you just keep going and going and going.
Okay.
So has anyone ever talked at you?
Of course.
And what was that experience like?
There's been a spectrum of emotions. There's been anger, there's been confusion, there's been terror, and then there's been like just sheer hilarity in some situations. So I mean, there's been a spectrum of things that have happened because of someone talking at me. Yeah.
I can't. It's the spectrum was so real just now. Like,
what do you mean?
It was so real, because I was like, I thought you were gonna go, there's been anger, there's been denial, there's been acceptance. Like, no. I thought that's the direction you were going in. For me, it's anger. It's just straight up anger to rage.
Really?
Anger to rage. Like, having someone talk at me, especially if they're saying something completely just out of this world.
That's
like,
the thing.
Wrong.
If it's out, if it's out of this world and it's crossed a certain line and it's out of this world, it's like, oh, you're hilarious.
Like, it just drives me to rage.
It's gonna be like, you're gonna feel so dumb when you're done talking. Because when you're done talking, I'm gonna mansplain for you.
I'm gonna mansplain for you. What's up?
I'm mansplain for you. What's up? And yeah, you're gonna understand.
No, it just drives me to rage, because they're gonna talk that BS to some other unsuspecting victim that doesn't necessarily know how to effectively communicate, and it's gonna stick in their head. Like, it's gonna stick in their head.
Yeah.
What does it say? What does it say? Honestly,
this is a completely offline conversation.
we're having it offline.
Like I'm mansplaining. I looked it up. This is a complete offline conversation.
You're like moving along.
It's based off of emotion, and I'm not. It's not real. Anyway, what were you saying?
I was so intrigued by what was going on at the computer that I honestly forgot. It's when someone talks at me, it just drives me to rage. Like, I can't function in that kind of environment, and being spoken to in that manner is just, I don't appreciate it. So that's just how I feel about talking to. That's open communication. I
mean, sorry, I hate to cut you off, but by definition, mansplaining would be No, talking at would be a type of mansplaining. Could be considered a type of mansplaining.
I feel you on that one. I wish you'd give us the definition, but
Mansplaining, a blend word of man and informal for splaining.
just read it.
Okay, a projector of term meaning to comment on or explain something to a woman in a condescending, overconfident, and often inaccurate or oversimplified manner. So essentially, if you asked me about something about IT, which I am a professional in, and I oversimplify my explanation to you because you don't know anything about it, I'm mansplaining depending on how you're feeling on that particular day.
Yes, that's accurate. Because if you did that to me, I wouldn't think that was mansplaining. Me personally, I would think that was effective communication. Because I don't understand what you're talking about when you talk about IT. I don't get it. I'm not in that world. That's not my universe. So you, I guess, quote unquote, dumbing things down. I don't know how else to say it, but softening your language to suit where I'm at is actually effective communication.
But let's take a look at this from a mental health perspective, right? So you say, don't like kick someone, you know, like you say I am bipolar or I have bipolar. I don't know which one it is. You which one? Correct me. Which
I am bipolar.
Okay, I am bipolar. So you say you're bipolar, and you go on to give a definition of what you know or feel or believe bipolar is. And then I come along and I say to you, you know what? Bipolar? I mean, it's not a real disease. You know, it's not something real. It's made up. So that's inaccurate. And I'm oversimplifying and explaining something. So that would be like an example.
Yeah.
So I think there needs to be. I don't like the way that's like
directed towards men.
Directly specifically towards men, because women can do that too.
Yeah, women can. Women do.
Yeah,
they
so,
do.
Yeah.
Put a man in a situation with a woman, she might do that to him.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. In a mental health perspective, are there situations where do you feel like sometimes maybe a healthcare professional might oversimplify or dumb something down to you, or like a nurse or some kind of professional doctor? I don't know. Do you feel like maybe when you're in a situation, does something like that happen?
I feel like, and thank you for asking that. In situations like that, I'm talked at. You know, they'll use turns of phrases that I don't understand.
So they're condescending. And they're overconfident.
And some of them are men and some of them are women.
No. I didn't put a sex on anything here. I'm just asking if they were condescending or overconfident.
Yes, overconfident, condescending.
Now, are they inaccurate, or do they oversimplify? Are the things they say oversimplified in any manner?
I wouldn't know if they're inaccurate. I'm not going to know until the autopsy, but but so I don't know about the inaccurate part, but they do oversimplify your emotions. Like what they'll kind of oversimplify what you're feeling in that moment. Like, you know, oh, don't worry, it's gonna pass. It'll be fine. You're okay. You're fine. You're okay. Like they'll say things to you in they're condescending.
So they're healthcare professionals splaining.
They're physician splaining.
Physician splaining.
Physician splaining is what they're doing.
Okay.
New word, coined it.
Yeah.
Physician splaining, and it's not. And that's why it's important to know the difference between being talked to and talked at. Like if you're feeling in an uncomfortable space, someone's talking at you and you're feeling completely uncomfortable with the situation, jump in there and be like, listen, you know, I don't appreciate the way you're speaking to me. Let's change the conversation and have a conversation where you're being spoken to, not spoken at. And that's key in any situation, but especially when you're in, you know, the mental health care system and you're dealing with doctors and nurses and people who don't necessarily always listen to what you have to say. You got to make them listen. It's important to make them listen. So. The last thing I wanted to talk about today was communication and technology. Now, I didn't have a lot of technology growing up. I had a television. I had a Game Boy. No, a Game Gear. And that was the extent of what I had growing up. I remember reading the newspaper with my dad when I was a little kid. I remember watching MASH with him, so I learned the history, a little bit of Vietnam War history or Korean War history. Sorry, my bad. I just don't remember technology being an issue or a problem for me. I don't know about you, JR.
Well, it depends on what you define as technology. Because, for example, you had a VCR, which was technology. I mean, you're able to replay a motion picture that would have only been able to be seen at a theater previously or on television at a specific time, right? So there's different degrees of technology and innovation. So, I mean, technology plays a huge role in communication. I mean, you said you looked at a newspaper. Well, that's a form of communication.
Yeah.
Mass print, printing presses. That's communication. So, I mean, there's different methods of communicating today. So, we may not read newspapers as frequent now, but, we do look at, I don't know, what's the website? Maybe Huffington Post or something like that for news. We've cut out the middleman, so now there's Instagram and Twitter, so something could just go viral based off of just sheer interest by the active user population on those platforms. So I think there's technology and communication go hand in hand, and there's a constant evolution in technology. I mean, if I speak to my parents, when they were children, there were no TVs, right? Or there were black and white TVs. I thought my parents are old. They might not have been no TVs.
My parents are old.
There might not have been TVs, but I mean, to see a motion picture, you had to go to a theater or something, or I don't know. There's a communications
I'm more
involved.
referring to, I guess, what I'm more referring to is like the advent of the cell phone and the PC. Like,
well, I mean, you had to invent the telephone first. You had to have the mainframe computer before you had the personal computer. I mean, everything evolves. So the personal computer evolved into the personal computer and the mobile phone actually evolved into the thing that came together to become the smartphone, which is where we are today. So I mean, it's just a matter of the mediums changing. I mean, when you were younger, you probably had to have a computer and you had to use a search engine to find information. And your cell phone, you could text message somebody maybe, but you had to call somebody. And then, fast forward 10 years, now that can all be done on one device. I don't know, we're just merging technologies to aid in communication.
Now, let's look at things like text messaging.
Yeah.
Before, I used to have to write a letter. Let's say I had a friend at school and I wanted to pass her a note. I'd write a letter. Now I'm texting her, but the language is different. Things are shortened, like the LOLs and the BRBs and the UR for your.
You're just living in a time where things are evolving a lot quicker than they would have before. I mean, if you compare, you've read Shakespeare. That's English. That is
old English.
That is English. That there was a period in time where that was the language that was spoken by the people that were living. Today, the language has evolved. It's evolving a lot quicker today. Like we're adding, 10, 20 words to the dictionary a year. But it's evolving quickly because everyone's able to communicate. Like we're so connected together that someone creates a word. It could catch on very quickly. I mean, the word that comes to mind, I think, is bootylicious. Right?
Bootylicious in the Webster's dictionary.
Like that
Didn't
word
make it to the Oxford.
That word comes to mind just because it was in a song, and that song was popular across the globe, and then the word became synonymous with a body type, and it was placed in the dictionary, and it is now a word in your vocabulary that you can put in an essay and submit to your professor. And
That's wild to me.
and I mean, they could be angry and try and not give you a good grade, but like you might be able to petition it. I'm not saying put bootylicious in your essay, but like, you know, you can make the argument.
You can make the argument.
So
is that it? Is that technology is just it's just moving so quickly that like are technology and communication moving at the same speed? Like, I really want to know.
That doesn't even make sense to me, what you just said. Technology and communication moving at the same speed.
Like, the concept of communication. Like, is it moving at the same speed?
Communication's a concept?
Listen to what I'm asking you.
Okay.
Please.
Okay.
I know technology is a form, like a medium for communication. I get that. But are technology and communication, effective communication, the communication we've been discussing today, moving at the same speed? And the reason I'm asking this is because of the language comment that you just made.
Well, effective communication what do you define as effective communication?
The ability to actively listen, the ability to assert yourself in a conversation, the ability to read nonverbal and verbal cues, and just being engaged, and the ability to analyze. I think being analytical as well.
So if that's what you define it as, then I would say that technology is actually reducing the ability for us to communicate. They're not increasing at the same rate. They're actually moving in different directions.
Ooh, you just blew my mind a little bit.
Just to use your logic. I mean, think about how you and I are able to communicate as cousins, okay? And look at our younger cousins and how they communicate.
When they're here, they're on their cell phones.
You and I are talking.
We're having a conversation. Yes.
So when you're having, so we might be exchanging the same information, but you and I are exchanging information faster. We're using nonverbal cues. Like, think about how many times in a text message that, like, this is one of the problems that I have consistently. That's why I'm like so direct in my text messages, because I'm like, I don't have time, because you can't have emotion in this. Like, you can't understand
emotion via
you can't
text.
understand it via text.
You
can't, right? So
no matter how many LOLs you put behind it, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. So you have to just like you be direct, right? And then that's why my messages are direct. And then when I'm in person with someone, we can have some sort of conversation where we can introduce nonverbal cues, where you can see that, you know, I can say something that's kind of cheeky and just kind of like wink or and you can see that it's I'm being sarcastic, or, you know, it's
being silly or
being
whatever.
silly, right? You can see those emotions by the nonverbal cues. So I think as technology develops and takes over how we communicate, we're actually losing our ability to communicate. But that's been at the beginning of time. Like, from the time we started using language to communicate, we stopped using verbal cues. I think back to the beginning of the initial thing I was trying to say earlier, which was as we learned to develop language, we lost our ability to use nonverbal cues.
Okay. If I had a mic, I'd give it to you so you could drop it. So we talked a lot today about effective communication, and, you know, I feel like I've learned a couple of lessons thanks to JR. I learned that mansplaining is not a thing. I learned that mansplaining is not a thing, ladies. So let's just get that out of our mouths. But I just, to everyone out there going through anything related to mental health, any kind of crisis, and if you are, for whatever reason, locked away, effective communication is the key to getting out. There were times where I had to complain on nurses, I had to complain on doctors, I had to advocate for myself, and the only way I was able to do that was through my ability to communicate and understand those nonverbal and verbal cues. Though we talked about it and I struggle with it still, I'm working on it, and it's important that we all work on it. With that said, that has been the dish of the day. JR, please tell them how they can reach us.
Most definitely, you can reach us and Onika at dysh, dysh, at daintydysh.com. That's dainty dysh.com. Thank you so much for listening. We truly appreciate you. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts,
Give us a 5. You deserve 5.
thank you so much. If you're listening to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, or any other platform, your favorite podcast platform, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate your positive support. And that's it for me.
Like I said, that has been the dish of the day. I hope you all have yourselves a very, very, very happy hump day.